I'm going to do one shout out in the room because I don't think they'll make it since they're not on the panel. For those in the room who can see her, Mrs. Marquesa Tucker Harris is our executive director. You know her, you love her well. Another shout out to KQ Productions just for being here snapping some pictures for us. Again, to Power Forward Media for getting the live stream going. And to all of our panelists, I'm going to hand it over to either Renetta or Mrs. Tucker to get us going.
The question and answer process for tonight's event. So first, we have some predetermined questions already that we're going to ask the panel, and then we'll move into some in-person and Facebook Live questions. So we'll invite the guests in person to just raise your hand, and you can stand up and ask their questions. We just ask that you all just avoid repeating similar questions so that we may ask as many as possible. Also, please keep in mind our community agreements when you ask your questions. And then if time does not permit for you to ask your question, just make sure you follow up with the African American Roundtable staff on any unanswered questions you may have or any ongoing conversations you would like to have. Their business cards are at the registration table. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go over the timekeeping procedures. Each panelist is asked to limit their responses to 3 minutes. Moderators can ask questions during which panelists will be asked to limit their responses to 3 minutes. Moderators will move on to the next question if any question exceeds 7 minutes of discussion. And we want you to share any questions you have for Art about abolition, leadership development, and our men in our work in the chat. And then we'll get those to the panel a little bit later. Thank you.
I've been summoned. I forgot something. Sorry, y'all. So something worth naming, since Renetta asked you to keep our community agreements in mind as you're asking questions to the panelists, is the community agreements themselves. And so I'm just gonna run through them quickly. They are: be respectful. You should see them on your screen. Just respect the space. Respect both folks' voices. One way to model being respectful is using one mic. And so as one person is speaking on the mic, let them have their space. Third is be open and willing to learn. These panels are really created for us to share more about our story and the things that we've learned. And the hope is that we ripple out our lessons and our best practices to y'all. So listen and learn. Be willing to listen and learn. And then we'll have time for announcements at the end. So if anybody has a burning thing they really want to share with folks, please save that and tap me and let me know, and I'll create some space for you. Thank you, Renetta. Shout out to Renetta being a dope moderator already. Passing it back.
All right, so now we could jump in and introduce our panelists. Give us your name, however you want to introduce yourselves, your pronouns if you may, and what's your affiliation with the African American Roundtable.
Hi, my name is Jordan. My pronouns are she, they, and I am African American Roundtable's digital organizer.
What's up, y'all? Joseph Wilkie, also known as Silky.Jose. I got connected to the African American Roundtable through their leadership development cohort that ran this winter/spring.
Hey everybody, I'm Devin Anderson. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the campaign and membership director at the African American Roundtable.
Okay, in my own words, I'm going to share the importance of today's panel. I'm sorry. No mic? It's right in front of me. Okay. words, I'm going to share the importance of today's panel on abolition, leadership development, and men in our work. And I so often have heard Devin talk about abolition. I heard him talk about abolition being a practice, and we know abolition is actually an act to tear down systems and institutions that don't work. But I appreciate hearing Devin over and over again talk about abolition and saying that you must practice it, and we have to begin practicing it with ourselves. I appreciate the African American Roundtable because they've kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. I am a leader, but I kind of pick what I like to lead, but God has been pushing me even further. And some time ago, I decided from just listening to members of the African American Roundtable about doing things in the community. My neighborhood had an association that was disbanded during COVID. The people who established it passed away. So I've decided to get more involved in my community by re-establishing the neighborhood association. So kudos to the African American Roundtable. I appreciate it. And I appreciate seeing Devin with so much passion to help Black people survive and to have equity in the community. You know, men years ago were very involved in abolition. We have Frederick Douglass, who was very involved, and we also have a gentleman by the name of William Lloyd Garrison, who started a publication called The Liberator. So we need people to know not only women have passion to want to help their people survive, men are also actively involved, and I really appreciate Devin and all the men who are engaged with the African American Roundtable. And Devin, can you and Joseph take no more than 3 minutes to share one of the biggest lessons you've learned about abolition?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mrs. Tucker. I think to what you said earlier, that abolition is a practice, and that it's an active thing. Like, right? You can't just say, I'm an abolitionist and do nothing. And so it's a practice. It's a way we orient ourselves to each other, the relationships we have with each other, as well as being committed to, like Ms. Tucker said, tearing down like these systems that don't serve us. I came into abolition because I came into the understanding that I believe a world without police and prisons is possible. And in that world, I just don't have a vision of a world without police and prisons, but actually what I have is a vision about how we're relating and interacting as communities. I have a vision of a world where our people have their material needs met. I have a vision of a world where folks have the space and the time to do what they need to survive, to take care of themselves. I have a vision of a world that is rooted in community where folks have green space as well. And so for me, that like commitment, and it's important to name that yes, I believe a world without police and prisons is possible, but it's also important to name that in order to make that possible, as we have to reorient ourselves to like how we engage with each other. And so when we talk about abolition being a practice, I often think about it as how can I continually transform myself to help transform our communities? How can I always be in the practice of, or not always, but more times than not being in the practice of thinking of new ways to engage in conflict, of thinking of new ways to support each other, of actively organizing against some of these systems that we don't want to see, whether that's the police or prisons. How can I support the solidarity economies that we so desperately need? How can I support mutual aid projects? And so yes, we have to I believe abolition is a thing. We have to be actively taking a stance against and organizing against these institutions and state agencies and the state in some ways, but it also root abolition in the practice of supporting community and helping or trying to help people ensure they have more of their material needs met.
When it comes to abolition, first, this is my first time hearing that definition of removing systems that no longer work, which I love because it does allow us to, as Devin says, first of all, look internally and what systems or habits or routines do we have in our own personal life. Because as Gandhi says, be the change that we wish to see in the world. So starting with number one from the internal. When it comes to the external world and taking on actions, especially if we are referring to police and prison abolition, the key factor is what is in replacement of it, and let's go to the root cause of why does policing or prisons even exist in the first place. Beyond the 13th Amendment, which had the destructive piece of allowing individuals to be imprisoned or to be slaves, basically, if you are in a prison. The biggest challenges that we have, as Devin shared again, is how can we have higher conflict resolution, again, starting with ourselves and with our families, and then with our neighbors, community, and so on and so forth. There is a tremendous need for higher levels of opportunity. Everything stems, and I recently, with the cooperation and the guidance of Jordan, wrote a fantastic article that should be posted this month for AART. And yes, so, the whole point about crime or policing in prisons, which is supposed to be at its base as a crime prevention tool, is like, why is crime occurring? And crime is occurring because people feel that their dreams are not possible to achieve and that it makes the most sense. So to me, everything stems at a base. Like, my whole perspective on progression is tapping into education. Education comes from the root word educe, which means to induce, to draw out, or to develop from within. So until we start looking at our families and we start looking at the individual humans within each family and are willing to develop the goodness and the beauty that they see from within, we'll continue to have challenges on the outside.
Thank you, Joseph.
Jordan, can you take no more than 3 minutes to share one of the biggest lessons you've learned about leadership development?
Yeah, so I think like one of the biggest lessons that I've seen from leadership development is really just kind of like drawing out not only people's like ability to like lead, but people's ability to like lead autonomously and be involved like within their communities. I think that by having people become like active forces in their community, it really kind of like helps embody some of like those abolitionist principles. I think that having more people involved does create safer communities. So when we kind of like draw out people's like natural skills, natural leadership, it really is something that kind of like builds upon itself, and helps kind of like create those safer communities that we want to see.
Oh, thank you. And I could just add to that, just saying that I have done my own leadership development through the process of being involved with the African American Roundtable. And I agree with you, Jordan. Like, it's about bringing out the best in others, ensuring that there is a sense of confidence and worthiness, everybody knowing their role and how to get that boost to produce a better self, and letting others talk while you listen and vice versa. That makes a good leadership development.
Devin and Joseph, in part one of Lessons from AART's journey, panelists were asked why there weren't more men on our panel, so you were specifically chosen to participate tonight. Can you share a little about why you stand shoulder to shoulder with other members of AART? And can you do that in 3 minutes or less?
I'm gonna try because I do have some things to say, but I think it's important to, and I'm gonna answer the question honestly, but I think it's important to first name that, like, right now, like, you know, a lot of our current movement for Black lives is led by women, gender expansive folks, trans folks, and that's just the reality. And I think it's important to name that there are many reasons why there aren't more men in our movement spaces. You know, part of it is like being a man, you know, to come into movement spaces and engage, we have to turn our back to patriarchy. And for some men, Black men included, that's hard, right? The Combahee River Collective, who I go back to a lot, they say, yes, we agree with men on the question of race, but we struggle with them on the question of gender. Like, that's what the Combahee River Collective said. And so to come into movement space, you have to be willing to turn your back on patriarchy. You have to be willing to turn your back on this idea that your maleness is currency in some way. Your maleness gives you the right to do certain things, to engage in certain types of behavior, whether that's, you know, dominating the conversation, or whether that's leaving certain types of work to women in our movement, gender expansive folks in our movement. And so you have to make that commitment. The reason I'm here is because I come into this work with a Black queer feminist lens. Bell Hooks, I was just talking about this last night, Bell Hooks talks about how do we move folks from who live on the margins to the center. And I try to come into this work as much as possible, trying to center the experiences of folks who live closest to the margin. You know, the Combahee River Collective and other folks like popularized multiple terms, one including like double jeopardy, right? And so as a man in this work, it's important for me to try to leave some of that at the door. And as a man in this work, it's important for me to try to do some of the work of educating other men around issues of patriarchy and how that's showing up and how that's actually affecting our ability to build the communities we want. And so, you know, there are multiple things, and I wholly reject this idea that Black men have been pushed out of movement spaces. I wholly reject this idea that there's no space for Black men in our movement spaces. And I accept the idea that in order to be in our movement spaces in this iteration, in order to respect the work and the more robust visions of freedom, we deserve, part of that work has to be addressing the patriarchy, addressing the historic, you know, misogynoir or the denigration of Black women in our spaces and our work.
Can I hear the question again?
Panelists were asked why there weren't more men on our panel, so you were specifically chosen to participate tonight. Can you share a little about why you stand shoulder to shoulder with other members of AART?
Well, for myself personally, this work is simply in me, and it's the only reason that I still have breath in my lungs and blood circulation in my body. So it's about the only choice that I have if I want to remain on this earth. Outside of that, though, in regards to the lack of male support that may be in these industries of developing community, to me, this again comes at a base root of education and having hope even that a brighter future is possible. Einstein says that the most important decision that we'll ever make is whether we live in a friendly or hostile world. And for most Black Americans in the United States of America, the environment has generationally bred hostility in relation and proportion with the poverty that's experienced. So that automatically is a that automatically is a disadvantage for collaboration and community. And I love breaking the word community in coming together in unity, because the subconscious perspective, this conversation that we're having is only 5% of our mind. 95% of our mind is operating on that subconscious level, which is all the experiences that we have that affect our personality or our personal reality. So with so many men is being raised in that environment and then being taught certain patterns of living that create more violence and more separation and more tough guy, just prevents the idea that cooperation is possible. And there's an extremely important scripture that says, man without vision shall perish. So it's extremely easy to control people when you take away their ability to believe that their highest potentials are possible to bring what they see for themselves from imagination into the physical reality. So this again comes down to actually a failing school system, which is ignoring people as individuals and developing what they have from within. So if you have no opportunity to develop what it is from within, man without vision shall perish. Now you're just here paying bills, taking care of your baby mama, and whatever else comes with it, surviving the streets. That is the answer.
Can I say one more thing? One thing I also think a lot about as well is historically, if we think back to the civil rights era, we think about MLK and all this, and I think there's been a chronic erasure of women in our work. And part of that, and I was thinking about, Ella Baker, and I was listening to a panel with Barbara Ransby at the Socialism Conference, and they talked a lot about Ella Baker. And Ella Baker, was a civil rights worker who helped lead and inform a lot of the collectives and organizations we saw throughout the 1960s. And I think one of the things that I'm super proud about this modern movement for Black liberation is we've rejected to some degree this idea of the one charismatic leader. And a lot of people thought that one charismatic leader had to be Black and male. But what Ella Baker says, and which is exciting, is we need to be building leaderful movements. Mm-hmm. And I think speaking to what Renetta said and what Jordan said about leadership development is that we have to be cultivating the skills, the organic skills that people have in us. And so I think that's another thing that can be hard for men to come into. This movement where we're saying, actually, there's no pedestal, right? You're not gonna walk 5 steps in front of women or queer folk or trans folk, but to the framing of the question, we're gonna be shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. And I think it's just continuing to humble yourself enough to say I'm ready to stand shoulder to shoulder. Actually, I trust the leadership, the vision of this Black woman, of this Black queer person. And I think that's part of it as well.
Thank you, Devin and Joseph. I think that, Devin, you probably should do that on a podcast. There's a lot there. Is there a male in the room who would like to answer that question in about a minute? How do you stand shoulder to shoulder with members of AART? Anyone? Okay.
Hi, I'm AART, aka DJ What's His Name. How everybody doing? Okay, well, I've been doing whatever I can within my community for the past, at least 6 years. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with people in art just by answering a call, asking what I can do and showing up and seeing what my community needs from me and what I can contribute. So,
thank you.
no problem.
All right, y'all. This concludes our preliminary questions from Art. We're going to take about a 10-minute break to grab some food and bio breaks. The restroom is right there. Food is over there, so help yourselves. And about 6:50, we'll take questions from our guests in person, also from Facebook Live. So if you're watching on Facebook, make sure y'all drop questions in the chat. And if you have not already, join us in taking this break. We'll be back around 6:45.
Okay, let's jump back in with questions from our live and virtual audience. Please listen carefully. The hospitality team, please retrieve mics from our videographers and keep an eye out for raised hands from guests who would like to stand and ask questions. In-person guests, we will point to you when you've received a mic from our hospitality team, and then you may ask your question. And then we also have AART, who's going to read some questions for us. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody from the audience? Okay, well, I'll go ahead to the chat questions from Facebook. Okay, first question, how do we meet the basic needs of the people?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that like we try to meet the basic needs of the people is actually going forward and creating kind of like those networks of care that you want to see. So I think the COVID-19 pandemic was like a really good example of this. Basically, people came together during a time of strife and really kind of like pulled their resources together, you know, to get people PPE, to get people protective wear for COVID, you know, to make sure that people weren't being left to the wayside. So I think like this really kind of ties back to Devin's answer around how like abolition is a practice and is sort of about like a sense of collectivism and community. We have to be the ones that kind of like take the reins to actually make our lives better. It's really about like involvement. I think just kind of thinking through personal examples, recently I was over at a friend's house and we were just kind of hanging out, sitting on the porch at night, and I heard some screaming from like down the road, and this woman was being hit by her boyfriend. Now, like within this community, like most of that block has agreed not to call like the police for certain situations. So what that means is that you have to take personal intervention. So we all just kind of like hopped off the porch, walked down the street, and the guy, he saw us all coming down, and he kind of just was like, well, this is a situation for me, and bounced. We were able to make sure that this woman was able to like get home safely. But when people talk about like how we meet people's material needs and how we keep each other safe, it really becomes about like direct intervention and kind of like taking sort of a personal responsibility for each other. So I think like it really is like figuring out ways to meet the needs that are present in your community. So you don't have to go at it alone. You can work with other people. You could form like a block club. You could form a neighborhood association and really just kind of determine the direction that you want to go.
In regards to meeting the basic needs, the basic material needs of people, I'm strong on education. I'm a big education guy. And where I come in here again with our failing school systems, failing to meet the modern day with the current economic and financial system that we live in the United States of America, one of the most beneficial ways that we can easily combat material needs is putting more profit into the homes of families by teaching our children or our youth how to become profitable. And just a simple baseline concept, again, this has to do with guidance and teaching people what they're supposed to do with their time. When people don't know what to do with their time and they don't have a pathway to take their vision into reality, they're going to be reckless, because what else are you going to do? You have nothing else to do. So you're going to explore life. So the easiest setup for us is to create mentorship programs that connect teenagers to people that are already experts in whatever it is that they're interested in, and have those experts teach these youth how to create the same success by duplicating whatever models and habits that individual has. And just a baseline concept, as we teach our children how to be valued at about $10 an hour, as we enhance their God-given gift to be worth about $10 an hour, or whatever that looks like. But $10 an hour, 4 hours a night from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. a day is $40 a day. And doing that 25 days a month is $1,000. 40 times 25 is 1,000. So every child in the house has the opportunity to bring in $1,000 of extra income into the family simply by teaching them how to be worth $10 an hour at whatever their God-given gift is. And this can be something as simple as a 16-year-old teaching a 6-year-old how to play basketball and running their own basketball camps. This can be something as simple as a 16-year-old running a after-school art program and teaching 6-year-olds how to find themselves through paint or through drawing or whatever. So I'm really big on mentorship, and as adults, we have to teach our teenagers how to use their time so that our teenagers can go and influence the younger ones, being productive. Everything is about being productive. You're either an asset or a liability. An asset is something that adds, and a liability is something that takes away. So because the school system is failing, it is our responsibility to create these programs that teach our children how to become productive assets to society.
And just very quickly, I think one of the things is how do we help meet folks' material needs is we have to keep making demands on the state. And I know that's like something that we're always in conversation around is like, what is the role? But we have to be making demands on government to help us meet our needs. We have to be saying that actually our people deserve, no matter what, they deserve somewhere to sleep. They deserve food on their table. They they inherently deserve these things. And so yes to all of these things. And I think it's never one or, it's always a yes and so I think we have to be thinking about this is yes, we have to think of this very collectively. How can we group together the resources we have? And by the way, we've been doing that for years and years, generations and generations. We think about how we actively help people meet their material needs. We can think about that as buying a fish dinner from the church, or buying a fish dinner from somebody who's trying to bury a loved one. That is us coming together to collectively meet each other's needs. But we also have to be making the demand, and we have to be actively organizing and building and winning campaigns that forces the state to do more of those things. And I think we saw more and more of that throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll wrap with this is they said a lot of things were impossible. They said the government can't afford, or they can't pay people, or they can't give people basic income. During the pandemic, we saw that. We saw stimulus on stimulus. We saw expanded unemployment benefits. So we have to be making those challenges and continue to make those challenges on the state, as well as taking collective action time and time again.
Okay. We got another question here. You talked about this earlier with abolition, but the question is, what is replacing the current police and prison system?
I think it's a lot, right? Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who has a book that's gonna come out someday. It was supposed to come out 2 years ago, but it's gonna come out. That's called Change Everything. And so the question of what's going to replace is infinity, right? So if we think about this in the context of, we spend in Milwaukee $300 million a year on police. We spend a lot more money on jails and prisons. what's going to replace it? The change everything like concept for me means like we have to change the way we orient ourselves to so many different things from our neighbor. Like one of the things, like everybody has a Ring camera now. Everybody has a Ring camera. It feels like everybody. And one of the things I've noticed with the Ring cameras is it allows people to isolate further and further into their own house and lives. Like you look at that Ring, you're like, man, this wonderfully nice person's here to talk to me. I see them. I don't want to talk to them. I don't know who it is, but I'm not talking to them. And one of the things like I think about is like, how do we change that relationship and actually like change how we relate to people and to see the inherent value of being in community and connection with comrades, with neighbors, with people. And so this concept, like, what are we gonna do with all of these like people, these quote unquote bad people? First, there are a lot of bad people who are not in jails or prisons. We can think about politicians who lead wars. We can think about like all the people who pillage and plunder our communities, right? And they're still allowed to live wonderfully wealthy and rich lives. And so I think it's like this idea we have to look beyond just thinking about like what's gonna happen to the police and to the jails and the police, but also begin to think about like how are we going to be in better relationship and in more relationship with all the surrounding people who live near us.
Yeah, I wanted to try and give some additional context in like a layman's terms kind of way. Right? Devin was alluding to some of the ways that we help meet each other's needs with the fish dinners. And I think if we take a step back and think about when we say we want to, defund, divest from, abolish police, remind ourselves that that also means building something in its place. And also remind ourselves that there's a lot that doesn't need to be built because we're already doing some stuff to keep us safe, right? That's the coat drives from the church. That's the neighborhood block parties. That's you and your cousins getting together on the weekend and grilling because it's hot out. That is restorative justice circles, right? So instead of punishing and harming and ostracizing somebody who did something that was messed up to you or somebody that you know, sitting them down and saying, look, you messed up. I don't appreciate it. This is how it impacted me. And what are we gonna do to help you do better? I think Joseph was also talking about conflict, right? And what skills do we have or don't have and need to build more of as we respond to conflict. So a lot of these things are already happening in our communities, and I think people don't equate them to safety. But the more we are meeting our basic needs, the more we are giving people the skills that they need to do something other than whatever we feel like we need police for. Whatever we feel like we need police for, the closer we get to safety and the closer we get to a world where police aren't really necessary in the first place.
Yes. And one more thing, I want to invite us to think about the times we didn't call the police. And maybe think about why we didn't call the police. Because Jordan gave a concrete example of them not choosing not to call the police and intervening. And I think we can all think of times where we seen something, whether it's two kids fighting on the corner, right? Or we seen somebody do X, Y, or Z, and we chose not to call the police. We chose not to get the state involved. We chose to navigate and deal with that situation otherwise. Miriam Kaba says, anytime you shorten the reach of police or prisons, you're bringing that abolitionist horizon forward, closer to us. And I think we can all think of examples of times and moments where we didn't call the police, where we chose actually like, we don't want to get the state involved, where we've seen something and we're like, actually, I'd rather try to navigate this myself with the skills I already have than to call this police who's going to be ineffective.
Thank you. And Jordan is going to speak to that question.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we also need to remind ourselves when we're discussing like policing and prisons and what comes next is that like our current system of policing and prison already kind of built the foundation for incredible sites of violence. I'm really thinking in mind of the Lincoln Hills facility that just closed down. That was a place where children were being abused routinely and like in some very horrific ways. So really kind of like the foundation of policing and prisons doesn't necessarily like get rid of violence or even really, solve it, because we saw what had happened inside of like the Lincoln Hills facility. Again, minors being sexually harassed and assaulted. Also, again, facing incredible amounts of like physical violence from like the staff. And also in just kind of like in our day-to-day with police, some police interactions, again, just going very wrong and resulting in, again, this incredible violence. So I think when it comes to kind of like what are we going to replace it with is really up to, us, the people, as like a collective to kind of decide. And I think it really kind of like touches on aspects of like self-determination. So there could be accountability processes, there could be restorative circles, and really what that line kind of looks like is up to the community. But I think it has to come from a place where we're kind of being principled, because we're leaving a situation where, patriarchal violence is the norm, white supremacist violence is the norm, and just kind of like the basis of our society. So it's really just kind of like leading with people who are victims of violence in mind, while also, trying to figure out ways where people are like accountable as they move within, people who have caused harm are accountable as they like move within community.
And the gentleman sitting at the table with Rai, you had your hand up earlier. Do you have a question? We're going to give you the mic.
Hey, I wanted to make a remark regarding the prison situation and the community. My personal opinion, experience, would be for a lot of people to be, more of a leader, take ownership and accountability. And it's not really what's done, it's how you come back from it. Knowing how you came back, that enforcement, you can give that to anyone. It could be a young girl or, a young boy, somebody that's going down the path. And typically it's guidance. In a lot of African American homes now, you don't see the tradition no more. You don't see the togetherness. You don't see, the pride in taking care of each other. Staring at materialistic. What happened, when materialistic wasn't there. We had a community of people that was blending together like camouflage. So regardless, people who have and didn't have, it was unseen because others were helping each other out. Others were, giving young people or whoever knowledge to, cognitively think about the situations that they make and what will happen, who will be affected. Even when people think about suicide, don't nobody care about me, like, you know how many lives you have. Do you stop to think about, who you're responsible for? If it's not financial, a spiritual movement with somebody, it could be, say, a high, it could be motivational or whatever. But, I don't really think that, it has to be done with any currency and nothing like that. I just think it starts with character. So you got to start with self, boundaries.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And I would turn it over to Renetta. Or did someone else have a question? Xavier has a question? Okay.
I have a question. Why did you guys choose these jobs?
Yeah, I'll quickly share.
Job havers.
No. I'll talk about it like, like this job, but like also dedicating my life and this juncture to movement work. I chose it because I still believe like this is our best chance of winning. I still believe in organizations, and organizing is our best chance. And so I've committed myself, and the roundtable was a great opportunity, and I've loved being here for 4.5 years. A big chunk of my life, if you think about it, like 20%-ish of my life. But no, I've committed myself to movement work because, like I said, I still believe it's our best chance. I still believe that we have a better chance, the people in this room, the people listening to us on Zoom, than I do going at it one on the world. And so I still think and believe that we have to be expanding our work. We have to be expanding the number of people. One of the things we always say is we need more people. And we say that. How do we know we need more people? Because if we had enough people, we would have won. We would have won this world we want to see. And so as long as we haven't won this world we want to see, we need more people. And I'm committed myself, and I'm like down to find that next person, those next people who can help us like move closer to this world we want to see.
Well, first I heard someone in the crowd share that the job chooses you, which is absolutely true. And I more so will take that a bit deeper and say that your gift will choose you. And your gift is inside of you. And it's extremely important as a young man or a young lady to be aware of this. Scripture says that your gift will make room for you and put you in the presence of great men. And Steve Harvey teaches that your gift is the thing that you do best with the least amount of effort. So first key that is important in terms of adding value to this world is being able to identify and develop whatever it is that you're naturally good at, because that's how you're going to bring the highest value, and that's what people will pay you for, honor you for, recognize you for. Because if we say that this black table is the bottom and my highest reach is the highest, something that you're terrible at, the best thing that you could likely ever do is get to be good at it. Maybe great if you put in a crazy amount of work, but something that you're terrible at, like me with science, I'm just never gonna really be that good at it, no matter how much effort I put in. Something that you're already naturally good at, you can put in effort to move up to greatness, excellence, and borderline perfection. And then you're able to add the highest value to your community. I feel that that's extremely important for you to know, because every single human being is born with a different gift. And again, going back to the school system, that's one of our biggest challenges, is that the school system basically acts as if we got apples, bananas, and coconuts and oranges, and that those are the only 4 types. Not only that, there's only one type of apple. There's only red apples, or there's only, whatever type of coconut. And the truth is that there's such a variety of different gifts and talents that life has put inside of us as humans. So as we grow in that, you'll know where to add value. And what is awesome, again, I'm big on mentorship. So as you become an expert in whatever it is that your gift is, and you become profitable and adding value to the marketplace and society, you are also then able to teach the younger generation that you will eventually have. Right now you are the younger generation, but 10, 20, 30 years from now you'll be in that young adult phase where you are giving back, and we're able to then teach the same success principles that we learned to the next generation. So what's great is it doesn't have to be directly coming and sitting at this panel. There's a lot of amazing people, barbers, construction workers, pilots, whatever, that are just good people and adding value to people's lives from the joy that they have from within. And the last point on this is, again, it may not be that you are directly in a movement, and it's more of your life being your message and the way that you treat other people. And the most important piece, honestly, young sir, is to find love within yourself and find connection to your highest power within yourself. And the reason is because we can only give what we have in life. So if someone is hungry, if someone on the street, if there's a homeless person on the street and they wanted a freaking sandwich, I can't buy it for them right now. I ain't gonna lie. It ain't gonna work. Not in my pocketbook. You know what I'm saying? Just right now, today. You know what I'm saying? And so you can only give what you have. So be your best, fullest self and give that to other people.
Thank you. Renetta?
Well, yeah, we're coming to the near end of tonight's forum. Do we have any more final questions?
Yeah, we have another question in the chat I want to make sure that I get to. Question is, how can we better serve African American Roundtable to ensure goals and outcomes are being met?
Is that the question, Jordan? You want to chime in? Go for it.
I'll go ahead and answer this one. I think for African American Roundtable, like, the value really comes in with, like, the people. So I think, like, choosing to get involved, choosing to come to either, a space like this, one of our evening meetings, or even choosing to, come testify at the budget hearing with us later this fall, is a good way to kind of, like, help and, like, add to our, our organization. There's also a variety of options available. We have, like, our leadership development cohorts, and our membership available for folks to join in too. And I think membership is really kind of like a wonderful option. Really just kind of like provides a space and community for folks to get involved and connect with others who are kind of like in a like-minded situation. And, it kind of, we have a political education committee and different committees that folks can join as a part of membership. So those avenues are the best ways to really get involved with art and kind of help uplift our message and also connect with others.
Okay, great. Do we have time for 2 more questions? Okay. I had a personal question, and I just wanted to understand. I know that mental illness is a large contributor to the disruption in our environment. So if we're talking about replacing the police and things of that nature, abolitionism, can you speak to how we would address mental illness, or also addiction, but specifically mental illness?
Yes. Well, part of it is cyclical, and when it's cyclical, it's beyond it's beyond what I'm just going to share here at this base. As a base, however, I love teaching Operation APE, and Operation APE is apples, prayers, and exercise. Apples, the nutrition that we put into our body matters. We're electromagnetic beings, and fruits and vegetables naturally respond to the energy that is inside of us. So that is key number 1, prayer, building a connection with our higher source, and being able to communicate for guidance in terms of being able to make intelligent decisions. And exercise, we feel better when we are in our best physical possible shape, and those having that internal joy of putting in the work towards being our best self, and being as disciplined as possible in areas that people may think don't matter, when everything matters, every discipline matters. I'm just gonna go with rewriting the baseline of people's awareness on how to interact with the mind, body, spirit trinity.
I think because I was pulled into this fight, and now I'm coping with my mental illness from the trauma, trauma-informed care, actually hearing and seeing people in their own skin and addressing the mental illness. There's no cure for mental illness if you don't know it exists, and that person is willing to accept that it's an illness, it's a sickness that has to be treated. So I think in this work now for me, trauma-informed care, it's effective when you see people and you address that individual for that individual, and the care and the programs that you get them in are for them. There's no one solution for mental illness. We all have different ways of accepting and enduring and progressing through our mental illness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, got my last question. How do we change how we relate with our neighbors?
Ooh, yeah. Jordan, go for it.
I think like the way that we change how we like relate with our neighbors and just kind of like our broader community is like we kind of have to shed some individualism. So it's really just kind of about, again, getting involved with your communities, and actually, you know, stepping outside and like not just being kind of like cooped up in your own little world or in your own individual household, but like really understanding that like just at kind of like a baseline level, like we are social creatures, and we do need each other to survive, is kind of one of the key aspects of that. It also kind of relates to actually, again, getting outside and, again, getting to know your neighbors, talking to your neighbors, and forming those relationships. Your interpersonal relationships are going to be incredibly important, no matter what you do. And it's really just kind of like the foundation of how things work. I think a personal example that I can kind of give is last year there was a house next door to me, and every 2 weeks this house would basically be getting targeted for like a drive-by shooting. So, you know, people would come outside, but like they wouldn't talk to the person who was being affected by this shooting. And one day, you know, I just kind of had enough of it. I went outside, talked to this woman who was basically being victimized by these shootings, and just kind of was able to connect her with an alternative resource to the police. Because, you know, the police would come out, but they weren't really doing anything to kind of solve the issue. So, you know, as I was just kind of outside talking with like neighbors and talking with the police, there was one police officer who said that he had been to the neighborhood 25 times. Well, if you've been to the neighborhood 25 times, why hasn't this issue been solved? And as I kind of got into deeper conversation with this woman and her family, essentially the police were kind of like withholding like the actual aid and kind of like social support that she would need to kind of like relocate her housing situation unless like she gave them information on like somebody who was involved in like some criminal activity in her house. So I was able to connect this woman with, again, an alternative resource. They were able to get her housing, and after that, the shooting stopped. I had another neighbor who had like came by and basically put up, it was kind of clever, he put up a bunch of like for rent signs in the window to make it look like they had moved. So that sort of thing, it's really just kind of like based off of, again, coming together to put your heads together to solve a problem.
Thank you, Jordan. This concludes our questions for tonight. And let's give a shout out to the African American Roundtable for having us tonight. And I will turn it over to our Community Program Manager, Raisha.
Thank you, Mrs. Tucker. Clap it up for my panel, y'all. The dopest. When I tell y'all I know some of the dopest people on this planet, I ain't lying, clearly. I love a good summary, and so I'm gonna start there before I get to my next steps, give my tech team a minute to get to the next step slides. But the two things that came out of these panels for me are both dealing with relationship. One, relationship with self, right? Like how well do I know myself? Am I checking in with myself to see what I need? Am I calling myself out in on my own BS? Am I studying? Am I in the environments that I want to be in? Just checking in with yourself, right? That's number one. And number two is relationship with community, which is an extension of that, right? Am I involved with organizations like the African American Roundtable? Am I talking to my neighbors? Am I just knocking on their door and seeing if they're good? Am I inviting them to me and my cousin grill out on a hot day? And so those are two pieces that I hope y'all take with y'all from this panel. Be in relationship with yourself and with your community. That's a big thing. If you have other questions that we didn't get to tonight, if you're in person, take a business card. We'll follow up with you. If you're not in person, my email address is Raisha@AfricanAmericanRoundtable.org. I'm not going to put the other staff on blast, but RYESHIA@AfricanAmericanRoundtable.org. And I want to thank y'all in the room for being here. Like, clap it up for yourselves. I told my panel and my moderators that I wanted this to be more conversational, and folks in the room definitely added to that, so thank you. As well as the folks in the chat. I told y'all we was gonna be better this time. I think we did better. So thanks for adding your 2 cents and your questions in the comments as well. Next steps. I think the first slide that I wanna be looking at talks about asset mapping. Yeah. So somebody in the chat asked, like, how can I support art? Where can I fit in? Jordan gave you a lot of great examples. We'll recap some of those here. We are organizing primarily on Milwaukee's far northwest side, automatic districts 5 and 9, or like upwards of 60th Street, upwards of Hampton Avenue. And those are areas at which we're looking for assets to put onto a map so folks know, where are my alternatives to police? Where are my food access resources? Where are my mental health access resources? So inviting folks in the room and on the Facebook Live to scan the QR code and submit any places that you know, places and people, right? Because it's not always in a building in brick and mortar, but submit to our map any people or places, businesses, organizations, groups, the homie them that got some skills, submit them to our asset map so we can put it out there for folks to know. I think next I actually am handing over to Devin, to talk about some next steps that he's leading on.
Okay. So some next steps we have is it's budget season. And we talked a lot about this world with less police and eventually no police. Join us. We're going to first be doing a training on September 28th. It'll be virtual. You can scan the QR code on the screen or type in the bit.ly to train with us, to prepare for the budget hearing, and then actually show up and show out with us at the budget hearing on October the 2nd. So those are both wonderful opportunities for that.
What budget, Devin?
The city budget, so Milwaukee city budget, if folks don't know, it's annual, and like I said, I think in some of my comments, Milwaukee police get about 46% of that budget, clock in at $310, $350 million every year. And the work we want to be in is what could $315 million, how could $315 million better serve our community? So if you're interested, if you got ideas, sign up for our testimony training and then show up with us at the budget hearing as well. Next slide, I get to talk some more. They gave me a mic and unfettered control. I don't know what that meant. They didn't neither, they just gave me a mic. The other thing is join us in membership. Jordan talked about membership. I talked about, look, I still believe organizations and organizing is the best way. So if you want to take a step with us, join us in membership. And that's a space where we have committees that do wonderful work. We provide different trainings. We keep you up to date with the African American Roundtable. Next year, we want to be launching campaigns. And guess what? If you're a member, you know, you can get some cool stuff, some cool swag. And we hope to be debuting. This is your time. I'm serious. We hope to be debuting some cool swag later this fall, a fall drop. So join us in membership. Scan that QR code if you're in the room. Chat with me if you are in the virtual space. You can go to our website as well and do that, or you can just scan the QR code. So join us in membership. We ask for dues of $5 a month or $60 annually. That's nothing. I was looking at my bank statement. I spend $5 on a lot less every month. I got every streaming platform. Devin, how many hours of TV do you watch a month? Maybe 7, but I got every one. And I think you probably do that. And so do you have $5 to sustain our work and to grow our work? And I'll pass it back to Rai.
Dope. Thank you, Devin. Thank you. So there's lots of opportunities to engage. Don't worry. You can run the tape back if you hear and you forgot something that we said, or you in the Facebook space and you missed a part, or you just want to rewatch. The Facebook live stream is out in the world forever and ever. It'll be on our YouTube in a little bit as well. Share it with anyone that you know. And again, if you're in space, thank you for coming out. Again, I really enjoyed this conversation. And it's a start, right? So I look forward to everybody coming up to me afterwards and being like, hey, Raisha, remember when y'all was talking about X, Y, and Z? I got a question about that. I'm ready for that. I think that's a wrap. Good night, Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us. In this space, get your food, get your to-go boxes, and have a good night.